I've noticed an increasing interest in psychopaths, sociopaths, antisocial personality disorder, narcissists, and malignant narcissists. There's a lot of confusion about the differences between these types of disorders. Because when you look at the symptom list, at how they treat people, you'll notice there's a lot of similarities. So it makes you end up thinking, are they actually different syndromes? Or are they on one continuum? How do you know? And then here becomes even a more important question to me is, does it matter? Does it matter whether or not you're in a relationship or no, a psychopath, sociopath, narcissist, or antisocial personality disorder? Are they actually, is it significant of a difference? So I want to kind of step back for a second, introduce myself, and then I'm going to launch into this topic about what are these syndromes? Why does it matter? What do we need to know about how to keep ourselves safe? Are they at risk to us? Should we be concerned about having individuals like this in our lives? So I'm Dr. Carrie McAvoy. I'm a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. These days, I primarily promote content and awareness about abuse and healthy and unhealthy relationships. And so I am also a narcissistic abuse survivor. I have encountered these individuals personally. In fact, psychopathy runs in my family, and I've known several individuals. I grew up around several individuals with probably who are on the spectrum. Narcissism is also something I'm familiar with. If you've read my book, Love You More, then you know I ended up marrying a malignant narcissist or a narcissistic sociopath. So I've had intimate, up-close relationships with these individuals, as well as being a clinician who's worked with some of the people. They don't tend to get therapy, by the way. Most of these groups are not motivated to change. They don't think they have a problem. They certainly wouldn't be vulnerable to a psychologist. Are you kidding me? But they send their family members, their partners in for treatment. That's who ends up coming in. And I've certainly treated the individuals around these people. So let's first talk about why it matters. Why are we even asking this question? Because I know there's a lot of energy on this platform and energy on social media across the board about the differences between psychopaths, malignant narcissists, and narcissists. But does it actually matter when the end result is damage to you and me when we're in a relationship with one of these individuals? Well, here's my thoughts on that. Why does anything matter? Have you ever asked yourself, why do you want to make meaning out of something? We are a meaning-making machine. We literally ask ourselves questions like, who am I? And what's my purpose in the world? We ask ourselves, who are these individuals in our lives? And what does it mean to me? And when we see a facial expression or something happening in our life, we make meaning of that. If someone smiles, we take it that maybe they like what we said, or they like us. We do this as part of a learning experience, but it also gives us a sense of connectedness and intimacy. One of the things I found fascinating, this is kind of just a side note, did you know feelings are contagious? That's one reason why we enjoy a TV show or a movie in a movie theater versus watching it at home. Not that we're not interested in watching it at home, but what happens when you're in a group setting and there is this experience together of something emotional, like watching a movie, we actually catch feelings from each other. Have you ever found yourself laughing to something that somebody else said, and you said to yourself, I don't even know why I'm laughing, but I'm laughing? Or you're smiling now because I'm starting to smile. We make meaning out of what we see around us. So that's one of and it also is part of our safety mechanism. When we've been hurt, when you get into a situation in where you've burned your hand on the stove, you say to yourself, note to self, I'm going to look at the stove and notice whether or not a burner is hot or giving off heat, or there's a warning sign on the stove. You make meaning out of the experience as a way to prevent the experience from happening again. So I think it's a good thing that we're asking about psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, and malignant narcissists, because we don't want to get into these relationships again. We'd like to know, what's going on with these individuals? Why do they do what they do? How could they do what they did to me? And how do I then better protect myself going forward in the future so that I don't end up getting injured again? That's so important to us. Well, so what we know, I want to preface what I'm going to share with theory versus research. And this is why you're getting so much confusing information about what's what. There's a lot we don't know. We're starting to know some things. When you really think about personality disorders as a science, understanding the makeup of an individual as a science, it's in its infancies. We really didn't start looking at this since maybe the 1930s and 1940s. More seriously, when we got into 1980s. In fact, that's when the first time a narcissistic personality disorder made its way into the DSM-3. Previously, it had been called other things. So we're just now beginning to unpack what is a narcissistic personality disorder. And in light of that, and we're also having new technologies where we're beginning to see things through neuroimaging that we weren't able to recognize before. We're able to do things with science and the brain that we really weren't able to understand before. So those are the things that are beginning to impact the science and the information that is adding new light into what we now know. So please be aware that one of the reasons you're confused, it is not because so much we're confused, but there's so much we don't understand that we're trying to make sense of. And it's a growing field of knowledge. What we know research-wise is that narcissists, as well as psychopaths, which would be considered by the DSM-5 antisocial personality disorder, have a different type of brain structure. In other words, when you would look under a functional EEG, it would be EEG or imaging, you would look under like how the brain consumes energy and what areas are lighting up and having activity. Their brains look different than a normal population. There's areas that are underactive, and then there are areas that are overactive. Like, for example, one of the areas that are overactive has to do with mentalization of our sense of self. So you have a part of you that looks at you and thinks of you and is concerned about what's going on with you, and you interpret what you feel and see and experience around you from a very personal experience. That area of the brain, at least for narcissists, I don't know so much about psychopaths, is overactive. They're very preoccupied, concerned, and aware of themselves almost to the exclusion of anything else. It's a very overexcited part of the brain. The areas of the part of the brain that creates distress, like angst and guilt, remorse, regret, the areas that have to do with like what you experience when you're in cognitive dissonance, that area of the brain actually is underfunctioning. It's not active enough, which makes them assume that they don't feel the same level of discomfort when something is going wrong. They also know that the area of the brain that has to do with empathy is also another area that's underfunctioning. And sorry, I've been struggling with my eye. I know I'm kind of fluttering my eye a lot, but I have something in it and I'm trying to work it out. So I apologize for that. But so they also know that there's a lack of empathy, that part of the brain is also another deficit. So we now know that there is these neurological deficits, hardwiring personality deficits. Now, what's interesting is imagine for a moment that you grow up in a world in which you don't see the color red. So whenever somebody tries to talk to you about something that's impacting you at red, you literally don't recognize it. You don't feed it into your input. It doesn't make sense. You don't make meaning of it because it is something you cannot see. You're blind to that aspect. I actually knew of two boys who grew up colorblind. And I'm not talking the normal, I think it's red-green color blindness is the normal type of color blindness, most popular kind. They didn't see any color. They had no color at all. To them, the world was shades of gray, black and white, shades of gray. Can you imagine then if I was to talk about the nuances of a sunset or how the Caribbean Sea looks different than maybe the coastline of California? They wouldn't appreciate what I'm talking about when I talk about the turquoises or the purples in the sky or the way the sun casts differently in California versus other places, which is why it's called the Golden State. I think it's why. To me, it looks different. It looks more golden there. But they wouldn't understand the nuances of that. They wouldn't even know what green is or what red is. They literally would be blind to all of this. So when we think of these types of individuals, there is a literal blindness to the way that they're impacting you and me. There is a blindness to feeling connected to other people, understanding what life would be like from your perspective. So that when you're a little kid on a playground and you do something that's hurtful to your playmate and your mom or your dad or whoever, the teacher, scolds you and then asks you, do you imagine what it would be like to be so-and-so? Would you like me to do that to you? That hurt his feelings. They were like, I don't care. I don't even know what you're talking about. This would literally not connect to me. That's the kind of blindness they would experience, is that it's just not impactful because it doesn't exist any more than for these two boys, the color green exists. It doesn't exist. So they have no perspective. So let's go back to the fact that we are meaning-making creatures, and you don't see other people's feelings, and you don't feel distress when you affect somebody. You don't have a lot of remorse over what you do. And as a result, what's going to happen? You're not going to have a lot of interpersonal connectedness with anybody. That's not what's going to be motivating you, because you no longer are invested in what anybody else's feels, because they don't matter to you, because you're not aware of them and you're excessively preoccupied with yourself. So what happens? Well, you end up defining the world in a profoundly different way than everyone else. Your motivations aren't the same as my motivations or your motivations would be. I'm invested in having good connections. I want intimacy. I want closeness with somebody. I care about how I affect you today. I'm aware, even today, this moment with the chats coming on, we're having a social experience. We're feeding off the emotions and feelings of other people. They're blind to that. So what motivates them? There's the first big questions we need to ask ourselves when we meet somebody. What is their motivation? Are they motivated by the same things that motivate you and me? Well, interestingly, there's where how we can begin to understand the differences. I'm giving you the key to understanding the differences between narcissists and psychopaths and malignant narcissists. Is first to understand what their motivation is. If it's not connectedness, if it's not intimacy, if it's not having a sensitivity to you and me, wanting things to do better, being a good team member in life, what's motivating them? Well, interestingly enough, this is how we can differentiate them, because I know if you look at the DSM-5, you're going to say, wow, okay, on the DSM-5, narcissism is entitled. And then you look over at the antisocial personality disorder criteria and you say, oh, entitlement and specialness again. You see over in the DSM-5 on narcissist, deceptive, exploitive, manipulative. You go over to the antisocial personality disorder, you'll say deceptive, exploitive, manipulative. So you start to say, well, then why did they classify these as two different syndromes then? They look awfully a lot alike between each other. So understanding the motivations will really help you to begin to decode which is which and which you're in a relationship with. So let's talk about the narcissist first. The narcissist's primary goal is self-importance. They are about elevation of self-aggrandizement, and their motivation is to get you to be a part of that system. They want you to participate, and that's why we call each other supply. They want you to participate in their self-promoted, their self-importance. They want you to agree that they are a superior human being and admire, love, and adore them, worship them, and all these things. And so they then turn to you and I as a source of support for that, as a source of a reward for that. I don't want to I don't want to use the word like a social, because it's not a collegial, it's not a cooperative experience. It's a predatory or a parasitic experience. They're looking to you to increase their sense of self, to validate, poof up, validate their worthiness, and that you become a source of doing that for them. Now, an antisocial personality disorder isn't so much looking for your validation of their self-importance. Their primary goal, and I was looking at some different theories on this, their primary goal is a radical disregard of other people for the advantage of oneself. They are about getting ahead. They want to win, and they're predatory in order to do whatever they can do. Now, both lacks consciences. Neither of them have a big moral code that guides them, which is not surprising based upon their behavior. But their objectives are kind of be different. Now, here's the other reason why we get so confused about these. By the way, just so you know, I can't see your comments yet because I haven't put my glasses on. And for those of you who get really frustrated with my glasses that have no anti-glare, I've got ones coming in the mail today. So going forward, hopefully I won't be glaring. But right now I'm just focusing on this, and then I'll be able to read what you're saying. But back to this. So the narcissists are all about self-importance and wanting supply. A antisocial personality disorder, which is a psychopath, sociopath, they lump them together. Some people say there's no differences between the two. It's all made up. It's a social construct. Other people say, no, there is actually differences. The person probably writes the most about these differences is Robert Hare, H-R-E, Robert Hare. He's even developed a checklist to kind of help you look at whether or not you're in a relationship as a psychopath or that maybe you're psychopathic. So I would say he's probably one of the experts if you want to understand. Martha Stout is another writer that talks a lot about psychopaths and psychopathy. But here's the other thing that's kind of throwing us all. And I've heard Sam Bankman say this. It also is coming out of Kernberg's work. So Sam Bankman probably is referencing Otto Kernberg, which is he thinks that antisocial personality disorder, this is Kernberg, thinks antisocial personality disorder is actually an extreme extension of narcissism. That actually it's a continuum, and narcissism is at the kind of the more low moderate level. On the other hand, when it comes to relational harm, they're dangerous. Please be careful. But when you think of like pathology, that then the antisocial personality disorder would be the extreme end of narcissism. I think that's an interesting way to conceptualize it. But there's also all these nuances, like what is a dark triad personality? How does that fit in? And what is a malignant narcissist or a narcissistic sociopath? And how does that fit in? And how does that differ from a straight-on narcissist? How do you know what kind of relationship you're in? So I'm going to give you some of the ways in which I think about it that helps me. Now, remember, like I told you, this study is in its infancy. There's a lot we don't know. We now know that it is neuroimaging that has informed us that their brain is different and that they have deficits, but then they have made meaning out of this deficits by the way that they see the world. So what I think is this. I think that they're very close, and there's tremendous overlap between these two syndromes. I think there's tremendous overlap. That the majority of the people we meet with narcissistic tendencies or traits also have antisocial and psychopathic traits. And that's what's causing confusion, is that there's a rare person who is just only a narcissist or just only an antisocial personality disorder. That most of us are interacting people who have a blend of both traits. Because here's the big difference between the two. If you were to stack up the DSM-5 against each other, the main difference between the two is that narcissist is not ruthlessly law-breaking. That's really basically about it. They're not ruthlessly, callously, cold-bloodedly law-breaking people. And yet we all know how often they're exploitive and how often they run over our feelings and do really awful things, deceptive, gaslighting things that are offenses and moral degradation. But are they breaking the law? Are they stealing from their company? Are they doing these types of, kind of outrageous things to their community, to their neighbors? Are they kind of like thumbing it to when they drive, whenever, all of this type of thing. That's the big difference. But when you kind of like put it from that perspective, that's not a significant difference, really. It's not to me, because how many people do you know who are narcissistic who are doing some level of law breaking? A lot of them are. Maybe not enough to come to the attention to the enforcement, but they're certainly doing things that you and I would consider, hurtful and inappropriate, that would be out of bounds, socially out of bounds. So that's why I'm thinking that this is actually a continuum that, well, I'm taking that back. I'm not for sure I agree it's a continuum, but I do think that there's a huge, massive overlay of one on top of the other. That you're most of the people that you meet that you would probably call a narcissist probably also has antisocial or psychopathic tendencies. And that's why we're getting so confused. And that's why we wonder what are they and what do we have. But let me come back to where I started about we're a meaning-making person. I want to ask you, why does this matter? Why does this matter? I can think of some reasons why I would spend time on this question because, like I said, I married one and he had a lot of antisocial personality traits. In fact, if you get to the end of the book, you'll find out that I'm pretty for sure the guy was poisoning me. So he was trying to kill me. That's pretty law-breaking, right? He was stealing money from me for sure. I know that was happening. I found the money even that he had taken out of the bank, claimed it for something else, and he stashed it. So I was terribly sick. So why does it matter? Why are we asking this question? I think part of what and I would love to know what you think, and I'm going to put my glasses on because I start to see what you're saying. I think part of why I cared is I wanted to know whether or not there was any hope. Maybe that's a question we can ask here with Brittany can throw up a poll on this. Why does it matter what diagnosis your partner or loved one or family member has? Why does that matter? But for me, I wanted to know how much hope there was. I also wanted to know how much potential change I could count on. And I wanted to know the level of dangerousness I was in, whether or not this person could be lethal to me. But here's what I was ignoring. I was ignoring the fact that it already was offensive, hurtful, and I was already being harmed. And that maybe these questions didn't matter so much because I was already being affected. So why did I need to know more? But I know that I really wanted to know. And I spent 3 years writing the book, guys. So it was really important to me. And I had people tell me, just stop. It's really affecting you. And, this is hard on you and you're really reliving it over and over. But I needed to make sense of it. I needed to know what's happening. So maybe that's what you're doing. Maybe you're needing to make sense of what happened to you. You know, you've been in a train wreck, but you'd like to know what train hit you. So I get that, but I think it's really important for us to ask ourselves this because I don't know if I like these. I may change my glasses here. This looks good when I use the blue filter, when I, create TikToks with a blue filter, but it actually doesn't look good on me. So people are like, oh, that's so cool. But like in real life, no. It's amazing what filters do. Yep, see, there you go. Now you got to deal with the glare. Yeah, so I would really like to know why it is. And somebody just asked, is it rumination? Yeah, I do think that part of it is cognitive dissonance, that we're really struggling with making sense. We want to know what's real because what happened to us is that they replaced our reality with their reality. So here's the thing about my life, and I'll just use this as an example, is that I one time asked my partner, as we were getting near the end of I knew we were, I could feel, I'm very empathic. Extremely empathic. And I could feel that we were nearing the end of the relationship. I could feel it coming, the end of the coming. And so I said to him, okay, here's what I think your typical day looked like. And I listed what I thought he did in a day and what we were doing. So when he wasn't with me, what he was up to. And then I said, is that anywhere near what's real? See, I had not asked him. I knew don't put him on the spot because he wouldn't tell me the truth. But I had to ask it in a way I knew he would tell me the truth because he wasn't going to lose anything by telling me that. I said, is that anything remotely close to what actually was happening in your life? He said, not at all. Nope, not at all. He had created this scenario for me, like a pocket. He pocketed me too, but he created this scenario, this reality, like a snow globe, and then I lived inside of it and thought that's what my life was, and it wasn't. It actually was something completely different. He was up to completely different things than I assumed. So there's what he told me, and there was what he's actually doing. So part of it for me, maybe this is what's going on for you, part of it for me was so I wouldn't feel so crazy. I didn't want to feel like I was that out of control and had no idea what was going on in my life. I didn't like that experience. So that may have been part of it, is that you're trying to get your foundation and get your feet back underneath of you, that it's really, really important for you to do that. But this is a reason why I think it's really important that you know, is so that you know whether or not you can get the answer to your question. A lot of times we're pursuing questions that we'll never be able to answer and we'll never have any peace. And here's the bad thing about all of this, is that when we do this, when we perseverate, I'm going to use a clinical word, which means we excessively think about this. When we perseverate on these topics, we are, in a way, giving what happened to us control over us, and it's now defining our life even when we're with this person. Now, if you know me at all and you've been on my platform, you know I'm all about making sense and healing and processing and really like grabbing hold of this. I'm not a person who just says, oh, think positive thoughts. I'm not going to invalidate or minimize your reality or dismiss that you survived something that was catastrophic. You did. You survived. You are surviving something catastrophic. There comes a point, though, that we have to then begin to understand what is actually symptoms of trauma and symptoms of pain versus what is it that we need so that we're safe in the future, and to make a differential, to understand those differences so that we do what's useful, helpful for us, and promotes growth versus just keeping us stuck. I one time met a client years and years and years ago. This was a long time ago. I'm sure she's probably not even alive anymore. She was an older woman. She's probably my age, actually. She was an older woman, came in and she brought me like cards, birthday cards from her sister. She was furious with her sister. And this was about events that happened in the past, years earlier than when I was seeing her. And she wanted to make sense of this sister, and she was enraged with what happened to this relationship. And you know what? This woman spent so much time on this old relationship that was over, trying to make sense of it, that it was ruining the quality of her life today. And that's what I don't want happening for us, is I don't want to give my ex one more centimeter of power over me than when he had in the relationship. I want to be free of him at all levels. He may or may not forget me. I don't care, but I want to forget him. Not forget him like I don't remember. I want to move on and have my best life. So it's so, so, so important that we understand what it is that we're looking for. Why are we asking these questions? So we can make sure that it's obtainable, that it's realistic and achievable, and so that we also then make sure that we're healing and moving forward with this. I so hope, by the way, that you're going to the webinar with Sandra L. Brown, who has made a tremendous impact in this field of psychology, who has really been on the cutting edge of research on psychopathy and pathological love relationships. That's going to be next week, Thursday night. The link in my bio for the ticket. And please, get a ticket. Even if you can't go, get a ticket, because the price of the replays are going to be higher after the event than they are right now. So if you want to save money and you're going to want to eventually listen to this, even if you can't go next week, you're better off to then buy it today than to wait, because the price will go up. Again, that's a link in my bio. So I'm going to slow down for a second and turn this over to you. I do have interesting research in front of me that I got here available, because one of the things I can talk about, but I want to make sure I hear your questions and look at the time, is I can talk about the roles that psychopathic and antisocial personality disorders see the world in. What role are you playing in their life? They have 4 main roles. Oh, that's interesting. The poll just came up with saying, why does the diagnosis matter? Some of you want to know whether or not, about almost 45% of you want to know if there's any hope or potential. 54% of you want to understand their behavior. And then there were 2 reasons. The rest of it is, I didn't even know what it is, and I still don't know why. So that's interesting. You guys pretty much want to understand behavior, but there's a part of you that kind of, you're a little concerned, you're preoccupied with change and hopefulness. Please be aware of that personality defects. Back to this example of the colorblind kids that I know who are now adults. That doesn't change. Those kids are never going to see color. You can't fix that. And you can't fix what's wrong with antisocial personality disorders or narcissists. You can't fix that either. So what questions do you have for me today? Would you like to have me discuss the 4 roles of the antisocial personality Trait C's, because you're one of 4 people to them. That's the only relationships they have with people is with these 4 roles. How do you get out of a trauma bond? Be sure to put a thumbs up so you know you're talking to me and not talking to each other. Yeah. And someone just said, please see my question. And Miss Panarel, I don't know how to say your last name. I just now put my glasses on, so I just now seeing the questions. So would you ask that again so that I can make sure I see it? But yes, the 4 roles. While I'm watching that, the 4 roles. So antisocial personality disorder, remember, because they have no empathy, they don't feel remorse, they don't care about how they're affecting you, they're blind to you in general. So they see people in these ways. You're either a pawn, so think of a chessboard. You're a pawn, so they move people around the chessboard in order for their advantage. Another way to think about it is think about the mafia. They would have the grunt men, the men who are doing the errands and the fetch and carry people, and the people carrying the dirty work out, carrying out the nasty jobs out. The cleaner, you'd be a pawn that you move around on the chessboard and you utilize. Of course, you're always watching because they're paranoid. This group is highly paranoid. So they're always suspicious. You can never fully earn their trust. Be aware of that. Don't ever assume if you're in a relationship with a psychopathic person that they trust you. They may trust you to a degree, but they're also watching you for the slightest indication that you're not behind them and on board. They're always watching. My grandmother was psychopathic, and I could feel it off of her. Me losing my role, and I was the favorite, by the way, which I never asked, and it was for a real weird reason. I don't know why. I somehow got to be the favorite. But I knew that all it took was me making one wrong move in one wrong direction, and I would be absolutely nothing to her. And she cut people off out of her life. She cut my father, her son, out of her life and pitted her 2 sons against each other as she was dying, and had one steal stuff from the house before the other could get to it. I mean, that's the ruthlessness my grandmother had. You don't want to fuck with them. So they're always paranoid and they're always watching, but you may be a pawn. So the second role they have is, are you a patron? Now, patrons are people with something. They have influence, assets, power, maybe connections, money, maybe sex, something. They have something that the antisocial personality disorder wants. And they see these individuals as stepping stones, how they get ahead. And so they butter up or get cozy next to these patrons as a way to get an advantage for themselves. So pawn, patsy, and then the next one is, pawn, patron, and the next one is patsy. Patsy is the target. That's the person that they plan to take advantage of, that they see this person has, maybe they want this person's money, or maybe they want think of it as a more negative, more dark motivation than supply. So a narcissist would see people as supply, like you're going to give me all this adoration, attention, love, whatever. Instead, psychopaths don't see them as supply. They see them as it's patsy even as an insult, by the way. It's you're stupid. You're being set up. They see you as like the dumb bunny that they're about ready to skin. So the patsy is the person they're going to take down. So watch out for that. And then the last group is enemies. Everybody else is an enemy. Because remember, I said that their worldview is paranoid. So they believe it's literally dog eat dog. And they want to be the winner. And there's only one winner, and it's going to be them. So they'll do whatever. And there is nothing off the table. Nothing. Here's another story of my grandmother. So I was trying to get a job for college, and I needed the money really bad because I grew up extremely poor. So I was going to have to support myself through college. There was a great job through the state that I lived in that my family urged me to apply for. And I thought it was fine. It's just a summer job. So I went in and I dressed for the part and interviewed for it. And then I didn't get the job. They had a quota to fill, and my category wasn't needed. So they said, sorry, we would like to hire you, but the quota, as a result of that, we're decided that we will go with somebody else. They call a couple weeks later and said, hey, we have an opening. person we hired, we ended up firing, and we now have an opening. But our question is, can you work till Labor Day? Well, my school started in mid-August for college. So my grandmother says, lie. Tell them that you can work till Labor Day, and I'll just go work for you. Now, I didn't know at the time is that these people checked up. I mean, it was a job where you had to basically run off your own schedule, but they checked up on you. They would drop in, and it was where I had to like put gypsy moth traps across cornfields. I just had to put them up randomly. I mean, not randomly. I had to use like an aerial map and put these all up and then mark them. She said, I'll just go and I'll just substitute in for you, and they'll never be any wiser. They don't need to know. Now, I didn't lie. I told the truth, and I still got the job. But that's how she ran things. It's like, whatever. Nobody needs to know. So, okay, the question came in. So back to this 4 roles. So what role do you think you've played? Obviously, in the relationship I had with my ex, I was the patsy. Yeah. And with my grandmother, I think I was a pawn. I think I was like, like a sidekick. She just kind of appreciated that. Now, there's a question that's come in multiple times over on Instagram, and it is something about Sam Vaknin, so I'm going to go back to it. So Jazz Vanderkoop wants to know, Sam Vaknin explains that narcissists do not consciously gaslight, but that they distort realities, and then they turn around, and she wants to know, do they believe their own delusions? I'm not for sure I completely agree with Sam on that. I do think, I'm working off of my own personal experience and my analysis of when I watched the gaslighting as it was happening to me, and I've watched gaslighting going on around me. I think it's both. I think sometimes there is a conscious effort to deceive, and so that would be a deliberate effort to gaslight, and it isn't a delusional reality. They're feeding you a new reality because they want you to believe the alternative reality. Why would my ex tell me that my sense of what was real versus his sense of what was real was different if he didn't know that it was different, if he believed his own delusion? He didn't believe his own delusion. He knew it was different, and he knew that I was being consciously gaslit on purpose. Now, he also has on the spectrum of psychopathic. So is that the difference? Is I'm seeing that? But I am even thinking of the narcissists I know. That's an interesting question because, the narcissists I know, a lot of them do shift reality, do make reality up and contort it to fit their sense of their self, which is they're a good person wanting to do good things, and what they're suggesting, even though it's bad or bad for you, that they find a way to kind of rewrite it so that it's really not what it is. So that's interesting. Maybe the reason I think that there is conscious gaslighting is that someone who's more of the psychopathic spectrum. Maybe that is. But back to your question, do they actually believe their delusion? If they're telling you a gaslit reality that they have contorted in order to reconceive the situation in a better light, yes, they do believe their own delusion. That's why I always say that narcissists are their first biggest victims. They're their first biggest victims. They lie to themselves first and then lie to everybody else because they need to sort of keep this puffed up perception of the self-perception. So it might be, I'm the good guy or I'm the wonderful woman, and then they'll do everything they can to validate that while they do all these things that actually are not good guy things to do or wonderful women things to do. So they do then buy into their own delusion. And I don't know if you guys realize what we're saying when we say this, okay? So one of the things that we're saying, imagine, for example, there's all the way to the end of disintegration, loss of reality, disintegration. That's psychosis, where you don't even know what's true. You can't tell what's dream from reality. You can't tell what's a hallucination or a false belief from real belief. You have no sense of your reality is constantly shifting and not based in anything actual. That's the far end. To all the way to truth, where we live in things exactly the way they really are. By the way, no one's here, and I hope no one's down here all the way. But we're somewhere between these two poles. You and I, everybody right now, is somewhere between complete truth and complete, distorted, shifting craziness. That's what it is, craziness. When we're saying that people create delusions, false realities that they then believe, that's a delusion. That's actually this end. They're moving into psychosis. The more you buy into your own falsehoods, the more you are crazy and in this nebulous, confusing reality that is not, it's crazy. I can't even define it because there is no definition to it. It's chaos. That's a good word. It's chaos. So chaos to real. You're saying, when we're saying that, if they buy into that, we're saying they've moved into the edge of chaos. That's not good. That's not good. It's not good for any of us. So I think it's both, Jazz. I think it's a question of both. That yes, there are some who are delusional, buying into their own gaslighting themselves first. And then there are those who aren't, and they're actually creating a deception, and they're being very exploitive and manipulative. Now, the question came over here. The question came in over here on what's the cause of narcissism, and then somebody said, "Oh, dysfunctional childhood." No, please, guys, we need to throw that out. Throw that out. That's not what causes narcissism. Narcissism is a biosocial problem that results in deficits in the personality. It's not because of traumatic past. It's not because of a dysfunctional home. It's not because they've had abuse. A lot of us can say that, and most of us, thank God, are not narcissists. It's been disproven. I actually have the reference sheets. If you want it came from Dr. Gregory Lester, who was on the DSM-5 committee for personality disorders. And he said absolutely not. Absolutely not. It is not due to adverse childhood theory. And in fact, when we do this, we're actually saying, oh, poor, they can't help themselves. Now, they have deficits. They're like the colorblind boys. They have deficits. But you know what? I have deficits. You have deficits. And we all need to learn how to heal from our deficits. We're all born with weaknesses and strengths. So does that give you permission to go through and then just cause all sorts of problems? Yeah, and it shows up in childhood. We're now realizing that you can start to recognize narcissism back in childhood. Now, I wouldn't recommend we diagnose our children. I'm not saying that. Please don't hear me go on record saying that. I'm not saying that. But you can see that this is started from birth and that these deficits perlinger. And the deficits are the ones that we've identified, talked a lot about. The difficulty with seeing others, the difficulty with empathy, the difficulty with the ability to be self-reflective, to feel distress, remorse, and guilt. These are deficits. Now, it's a biosocial connection, which means, okay, you could be born with a deficit, but other things have to help activate it. What are those things? Well, we don't really know. Somebody asked over on Instagram, could trauma be part of the reason what brings it up? Well, maybe. Could be caretaking, mismatch. It could be, I don't know. That's right now what we don't know. There's a lot what we don't know because, as I said, this is in its infancy. What we know about personality disorders, right? Compare, for example, what we know about the universe and how little we know about the universe, but we've been studying it all the way back, right? You can think about Galileo, all these people. We can go back thousands of years and know that we've been asking, is the Earth the center of the universe, or is the sun, or are we part of something big, and what's in the center of the, we've been asking these profound questions. And you would say our understanding of the universe is teeny. Well, I'm telling you, what we understand about personality disorders is even less. We know even less than we know about the universe. We understand about personality disorders. So it's extremely small. My book title is called Love You More, The Harrowing Tale of Lies, Sex Addiction, and Double Cross. And it's a true story of what happened to me and how it can happen to anyone. I'm a psychologist with 20 years of experience. I stopped practicing before I met this guy. I had treated, personality disorders is one of the groups I treated. And that, I didn't spot it. And there's lots of complicated reasons why I didn't spot it. But thank you for asking. So it's a biosocial, which means a combination of biological and social factors. Exactly, Stephanie. Exactly. So do you think that they realize they should be sympathetic in certain situations? I think, if they're a real good imitator of other people and observe what happens socially, I think that they realize that. Okay, so my ex, again, let me use that as an example. And I have family members, so I can tell you from family members, they certainly know how to do it for other people. They know that it does something good for them when they do that. but it really isn't something that they're personally motivated to do, or that it really is rewarding for them to be kind or empathic or understanding. But I've seen it. I've seen them give it, but usually it's so for something else. There's a payoff. It's called a secondary gain, and the gain is for themselves. It's supply of some form. So another really complicated question is, did narcissism related to other exceptionalities like Down syndrome? That Down syndrome is strictly a genetic disorder. We can isolate what happened that causes Downs or trisomy. I don't know if I can trisomy. Anyway, you know what I mean. Yeah, today's one of those days that I'm having hard times with words. No, we can't isolate it to specific genetic problems. It's not been that narrowed down specifically. They've tried to with psychopathy. I don't know if you're aware of that. If you go out there and look, the research on warrior gene, have you ever heard that? Like a warrior, like a fighter, soldier. They have isolated that there are some genes related that they think might be tied into psychopathic behavior. Now, interestingly enough, I have it. I have those genes. My son has those genes. None of us are psychopathic. So you can have those genes, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have problems with it. Here's a good way to think about these conditions, and this is where people get really stuck on this, is that we want them to be an all or nothing and to be an exclusive group that's clear cut and clean and very understandable. And it's not. It's not. It's messy. Thank you. Trisomy 21. Thank you. My uncle was Downs. My uncle was a trisomy 21 as well. Lovely, lovely man. He's passed away now. But yes, I'm very intimately aware of what that is and grew up with it. In fact, grew up around it. And I actually worked with developmentally disabled adults way back in the day. But yeah, so thank you for that. That's a great question. So we don't really understand exactly how it's a complicated, how these things get activated is extremely complicated. We don't really understand what activates all of this. There are some things like the trisomy 21 is a great one where there is a specific gene that's been isolated as a problem. And when it happens, when there is 3 on this 21, that, for example, my son is in remission for acute myeloid leukemia. If you guys know anything about acute myeloid leukemia, it is a genetic condition. It is something that happens when right now, your genes are being affected by your environment and shifted, and they can mutate. My son had a mutation that caused it in this life-threatening condition. And so the treatment then was to shift his genes to eradicate the mutation. We haven't gotten to the place of understanding narcissism and psychopathic behavior to where we can do that. And here's the even more ethical question. Would we want to do gene shifting if we could? Because, for example, they've done this with blindness. They've taken people who've lost sight in their lifetime, who once had sight and then lost sight, and then they have had people who never saw, and they found an ability to give some people their sight back. But they found that those who didn't see for long enough before they lost their sight could never see the way you and I see. That there is this critical window that we have to learn certain skill sets, and if we don't learn them, we can never learn them. So if we could correct this, what's wrong with people when they get into adulthood, would it work? Could they relearn something that they should have learned in these critical windows of time? So I don't know. So those become, and if we change a person's personality, are they essentially themselves? Or have we now essentially annihilated the original self? See, it takes you into all these very interesting kind of hard places that we can't really answer super well. Another topic came up with Brittany, my moderator, and thank you so much, Brittany, for being here. I super appreciate her. She's always with me, and I love the work that she does here. But that brings me to another. I won't get into healthy boundaries versus ultimatums, but I'll tuck it away as another good topic. But let me end today with talking to you about how I'm making a big change in my subscription and community life. I had this private premium group called Vibely. where you could join and then be part of it. But Vibely's been sold and now it's going to another company. And then it's just, it doesn't make sense to stay with Vibely. It just doesn't make sense. So what I'm going to be doing is, because I have subscriptions both on TikTok and Instagram, is I'm going to change and really put my efforts into the subscriptions. So what does that mean for you? So subscribers will get, instead of joining my community group, which is where I really was trying to get all of you over there, I would love you to subscribe, and this is what you'll get. I'm going to create a private, secret Facebook group for only subscribers. So once you become a subscriber, I'm going to have you get a hold of me, and then once you get a hold of me, and I will add you to this group. So it's subscriber-based only group, and we will also be doing once a month video chats, just us. So I won't be hosting it through these sites. I will be hosting it directly. Maybe we'll do a Zoom call. Maybe we'll do something else, but we'll do it directly through that. So the subscriptions are, you can subscribe through here. And how I know is, like, when you see that little banter on Instagram, I don't know how I know. I know there's 3 subscribers on Instagram, and I think I have 6 subscribers on TikTok. But subscribers will get a private community group that I'm a part of, that we'll be talking to. We'll be doing once a month groups together, or like a video chat together, offline. We'll do it offline, so it's private, and that will be for subscribers only. So if that's something you're interested in, please become one. That would be awesome for me. And that will be in lieu of my private community, which I'm going to have to do instead of Vibely. Vibely is disappearing. It's been sold to Kabagi, K-A-B-A-G-I or J-I, and they want $110 a month for me to run it. No, I don't need to do that. So I will create the community group later today. And then once I do that, I will get a hold of all of you who've subscribed and let you know how to join the Facebook group and all the benefits that go with the Facebook group and the contact with me. And then we can talk about this stuff offline, and we can talk about it on video chats, and all of this kind of stuff that we can be able to do it. Oh, thank you so much, Kay Antonio. Did I get to meet you? Did you and I talk while I was there in Austin? By the way, I'm going to be in Toronto. Toronto is on the 19th. It is there's a reception, and you get a free drink ticket to go for the going, and then there is a panel discussion that's earlier, and you get a journal. I've helped create. Actually, I was the instigator of the creation of the journal. So you get a journal with advice from the creators going to be there, and that's a gift to you as well as a drink. And by the way, there's only a few slots left for Toronto's panel discussion, but we still have plenty of room for the reception. So I'd love to meet you guys in person in Toronto. It's going to be a fantastic weekend. And so thank you so much. I already had 1 new subscriber. Thank you so much, Sly. So yeah, please check out subscription both on Instagram and on TikTok, and that way you can be able to learn more about it. We're hoping to do meetups in New York City and LA is being bantered about. And then the other thing is being bantered about with me and a couple creators is putting together a very high-end healing retreat, and it would be in Mexico, and that would be in 2024. We'll have a small group, a select group. We'll go down, and then it will be all about an experience of you healing and getting in touch with yourself, figuring out what's holding you back, building community with other survivors like yourself, and having a fantastic experience, being able to sort of rest. And that will be in Mexico in 2024. And so as we start to put those plans together, I will let you know more about that and how to take advantage of that. So the last question I will touch on, Sly, Sandy or LA, I don't know. Right now we're saying LA, but I don't know what area of LA is. And yeah, that retreat will be more of a psychological focused. So it's going to have a heavy kind of emphasis on healing. But so stay in tune about that possibility. Yeah, Mary Lee, your question about Facebook, yeah, that's a tough one. There's a part of me that would almost urge you just to create a throwaway email and I know Facebook would kill me for saying this, creating a profile that's just your own, nobody knows about, that you just use for your healing, because, anyway. So let me go back to this psychosis. What is psychosis? So the best way to understand psychosis is understand that all of us, we are getting a whole bunch of stimulation right now, lights coming in, colors, sounds, tastes, smells, and my brain's decoding that. and it's making sense and it's creating meaning out of it. It's telling me that I'm in this, sitting at this chair in front of this desk talking to you. That's what it's telling me. So, but that's not exactly real. That's my interpretation of real. Now, how close to real is it? Is how healthy I am. If I can see real as it is, which no one does, that's super healthy, but nobody's over there. Well, hopefully we're close, but nobody's over there. But if I'm really misunderstanding everything I'm seeing and interpreting and making sense of, or if I'm really like doing weird things with it and getting wrong information even, that's chaos. It's not real at all. It's like worse than dreams, because even dreams have consistency and coherence. You think about it. It tells a story, maybe a crazy story, but it tells you a story. So chaos is like distorted, shifting reality. Imagine your worst nightmare that's like, imagine maybe a movie or something where everything's like not what it is and it's constantly shifting and morphing. That's chaos. So delusion and hallucinations are both signs that we're in this chaotic place where we aren't in touch with reality. And delusion is when I believe something that's false to be true. And then a hallucination is anything that my senses sees, feels, or experiences that isn't actually true. Like if I smell something burning and there's nothing in the house that's burning, that could be, it's very rare. We very rarely have olfactory hallucinations, but it would be an olfactory hallucination. More commonly is we hear an auditory hallucination or we see a visual hallucination. Believe it or not, schizophrenia most often hear hallucinations. They don't usually see them, but some do see them. Tactile hallucination is usually happens when you have, like, you feel bugs crawling on you. That's usually due to a overdose of a medication overdose. So even hallucinations tell us a lot about what's happening to you because certain types of problems cause certain types of hallucinations. But if you're not seeing reality as what it really is, that's delusional. That's psychotic. That's moving into chaos. So what we're saying is when you meet somebody who actually believes their falsehoods, they're not functioning well. They're functioning awfully close to the crazy end of the world. Night terrors is something really different, and I don't know a lot about it, but I'll have to talk about it another time. I need to jump off because what I'm going to do now is heading over to YouTube to hang out with anybody who wants to hang out with me while we rewatch the TikTok live from Tuesday. So that's where I'm going to go right now, the same handle as I have here. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Have an awesome weekend. I'll be back on Monday to hang out with you then. I'm not going to do the subscribers live this Saturday. I'm going to postpone that and do something different. But because we're setting up this new subscription base, so let me get that subscription-based program up and running, and then I will announce when the live is, and we'll do it privately, because I think that's way more intimate than having everybody else here watching and asking. So make sure you subscribe so you can get those benefits, and I will see you.